What's up, guys? Couldn't even bother to wear a shirt because it looks awful and it hasn't been ironed. Let's talk about how to pass Morgan Stanley's first round interview. Hey, it's Mike from Job Ready English, and we help international students get hired.
They really do need to join the workforce.
In the past, the interview series, we break down the interview process for world famous companies to help you pass the interview. Hit subscribe and click the bell to get new videos every week. And guys, if there is a video that you would like us to do, a company you would like us to cover, put it down in the comments below, and who knows, it might be one of our next videos. Let's talk about Morgan Stanley. So we've covered quite a few investment banks together, and it differs a lot from, say, for example, the 3 questions that we'd expect from JP Morgan, what I typified as one of the easiest IB interviews that you can have, or investment banking interviews, and also the higher view process for Goldman Sachs. Morgan Stanley still, shock horror, the majority of their interviews are done via phone. They'll actually do 2 telephone interviews. We're just going to cover the first one today, which is the HR screening interview, and you can then expect to be interviewed again by a member of the team that you're applying to. So what does this look like? Well, we're looking at about 30 minutes for the interview and 4 to 6 questions. Stick around until the end, when I'm going to talk through what the senior interviewers at Morgan Stanley put together as the 10 biggest interview mistakes that they see. I'm going to go through them one by one. I'm going to explain them to you. And I'm also going to tell you about the ones that personally I don't tend to agree with, because a lot of times when we get advice, we need to make sure it's culturally specific. And some advice which applies to the US doesn't apply so much to the UK or to other countries. So what questions can we expect from Morgan Stanley? Well, today, actually, it's going to be quite simple. We're going to deal with 4 why questions, and then we're going to run through some technical or soft serve commercial awareness questions. What do I mean by soft serve? I mean, they're relatively easy. If you're a fit for the role, if you are coming from a suitable background and you have a genuine interest in doing that job, then really for you, that should be no problem. So what are the 4 why questions that I'm going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about why you, why Morgan Stanley, why this role, and why do you want to work in banking or finance? This is interesting because normally we don't deal with that many why questions, but we have alternatively dealt with them separately quite a few times. For example, why you? If you look up above, you'll be able to click on one of the cards where I break down how to answer a personal introduction question or tell me about yourself. So let's talk about why you and just flash through this and what we're looking for. Well, basically, this is you presenting stuff that is on your CV in a quick pitch. Say 2 minutes is something I quite like to work with. It's a good chunk of time. If you're wondering how many words can I say in 2 minutes, probably about 200 to 250. We've spoken about this before, but when most people get to around 150 words per minute, they tend to breathe quite quickly or gasp, and it can be a little bit It can be, I'm talking a bit too fast, obviously. It can be a little bit difficult to understand them. They won't use what I call oral punctuation, so they won't pause in between. I don't know if you've ever tried to listen to someone who speaks very quickly, and for me, my mind very quickly gets jumbled up because they don't give pauses in between the sentences, and it makes it really difficult for me to understand and just have that second or two to process that sentence and what they've just said. So what are we looking for when we talk about why you? Well, first of all, who are you and what are you doing right now? What's your educational background? So ideally, it's like if you're a master's student, what was your bachelor's degree? Where did you study? And then we're looking for what is it that you want to do? So I want to work in risk, or I want to work in finance because, and that would be quick pitch, 50 words. Then you'd want to talk about relevant skills and experience. So work experience, extracurricular activity, volunteering, or it could just be academics. I've spoken about this in other videos. Please don't get really caught up in the whole no skill, no work experience, no jobs meme. It's not actually true. It's just about what you're going to adjust and explain and frame in a graduate role. So pick about 2 or 3 things that you think quite closely relate or somewhat relate to the job that you're applying to. And lastly, talk about your skills and interests. So languages, coding languages, technology, hobbies, achievements, sports. And I always say to the candidates that I work with, try and end with a bang, just something that's interesting, just, a little tidbit. It doesn't have to be particularly relevant. It could just be, I've traveled to over 30 countries, or I'm a bit of a whiz when it comes to making a chocolate cake. Just something that I quite like as a talking point that you can leave out there, and maybe the interviewer is gonna latch onto that at the end. And that's your personal introduction. It's reasonably simple. The keys for a good personal introduction is practice. So if you are putting this together or you've watched that other video on the card, which talks about doing a personal introduction, you're like, oh, I'm not very good, or I talk too long, or I don't talk enough. Generally, I tend to have candidates go through this at least 10 times on, numerous days. So there's quite a lot of iteration, repetition. And I like to think about this like writing. A lot of times for me, and maybe for you, the first thing that I write is generally not that good. When it gets better, it's the editing process. It's me going back, and generally for me personally, I tend to write or say too much, and then I need to cut that down, which is why I have a script. I have things that I can follow so that I can be reasonably concise. So next up is why Morgan Stanley. So this should be an easy one for you to do, particularly if you are interested in banking or finance. Just go and look at their About Us page, quarterly report, their media pack, their annual statement. Guys, 15 minutes, 5 facts, and a 2-minute answer is all that you need. And really take the time of sitting down with a candidate recently, and he prepared these phenomenal answers for a different bank actually. He said, all it took me was just 10 minutes just having a quick look at the first 10 pages of the annual report. It doesn't have to take you very long, but you will get punished if you're lazy, because your answer will just sound generic. And if you're wondering, well, how do I know if my answer is generic or actually it's quite good? The facts that you've picked can't be said for another company. They could only be said for Morgan Stanley. Then you know that your answers are reasonably unique. And if, for example, this is something that's come up recently, you're saying answers and you think I sound quite robotic, or I just keep saying all these different numbers, then maybe read a bit more of their annual report, or look at recent deals that Morgan Stanley have done, the news, all the things that they've been interested in or invested in. And there's really no shortage of information that you can look through and find what resonates with you. Find the thing that you kind of go, oh, that's quite interesting. So for example, for me, I'm a bit of a tech geek. Anything to do with technology, I don't particularly understand it, but I kind of find it interesting, and it would come across in what I'm saying to you if you were the interviewer watching me. Why this role? So again, another really standard question we've dealt with many, many times. Make sure you read the job description. You understand what you'd be doing day to day, week to week. What would your 9 to 5 look like? Would you interact with clients, not interact with them? If you're on the computer, what would you be doing? What's maybe the career trajectory that you're looking at over 3 to 5 years? 3 years being, the general term of a graduate scheme here in the UK, or a training contract. What type of qualifications would you be looking to train up for? Whether that be CFA, IMC, whatever that might be. Again, just doing your homework and thinking about the skills and experience that make you relevant to that role, whether that be from your personal interests, your extracurricular activities, whether you have directly related working experience to banking, or you're just studying a finance related subject. Just think, what are the things that I have in common with this role that I could talk to you about? Which leads us on to our final question, which we haven't actually heard, I don't think, from any other bank that we've covered, which is a really close probe of just, why do you want to work in banking and finance? What motivates you? What interests you? So just some ideas that have come up from candidates before, because you might say, well, actually, I didn't study a subject that's relating to banking or finance, or I don't really know. Some people are interested in it because of what their parents have done. It may be just something that you watched on TV. For a lot of students, what I tend to find is they'll become interested in things like crypto, or just something that has really kind of captured their imagination, and off their own back, they've then sat there and studied courses or started trading or done something, and really don't diminish that. I was speaking to a candidate not that long ago, and he was talking about his passion for cryptocurrency that he'd been pursuing for a year. And I thought that was a great example, because we're really looking for demonstrations of what the Americans call skin in the game. I think Nassim Taleb kind of made this a little bit more widely appropriate, and it was used by lots of great sports coaches, for example, like John Wooden. But skin in the game basically means, what have you done, like actually done, to say, oh, I know how to do this, I've actually done this. For example, for a coder, it would be, let's see your GitHub, let's see the things that you've actually made. It doesn't have to be good. You don't have to be knowledgeable, you don't have to be an expert, but really trying to think, where does that come from, instead of just saying, well, I really just want to make a lot of money, or I watch Billions or The Wolf of Wall Street and I think it's super cool. It's not going to be enough, because something that really seemed to come across from a lot of candidates who have gone for interviews at Morgan Stanley is that you have to be really clear why you want to do this, and that motivation must be crisply communicated. If it's not, then you're going to get dropped. That's almost for certain. So that's the why questions, and really what we're looking for, a structure that I quite like, or a thought process to go for, is just to think, what's 4 or 5 things that are unique and kind of grip somebody when they talk about why they want to do something. If someone said, if a candidate turned around and said, well, I want to work in finance because actually, since I was a kid, I've always been interested in finance. I started reading into Warren Buffett, and I watched some of the annual general meetings from Berkshire Hathaway. From that, I started getting interested in reading. I took some courses on Coursera. I've actually done some trading myself. I follow Bloomberg Business News most days. I'm really interested in this particular sector. And what's sort of happening here is that candidate is telling a story, and they're really demonstrating skin in the game. A lot of times candidates can get really caught up in not being good enough or professional enough, but really we're not looking for knowledge. And funnily enough, this is something we're going to look at when we talk about the 10 biggest mistakes from JP Morgan's senior interviewers, which I thought was really interesting, and a really good post, which I'll also share in the description below. We're just looking for people who are actually trying to do stuff and failing, because everybody starts off bad. I don't know about anybody else, and I deal with this a lot whenever I talk to young writers, and they'll say, oh, how can I become good at writing? And my starting point is like, well, just write every day and be bad for a while, and then you'll get better. And that's really how you can improve. Okay, so we've dealt with the 4 why questions. Now I want to look at what you may also get, which is a 1 or 2 commercial / technical questions. As ever, I've just picked out some random examples that I quite like the look of, and also that I think will be really good teachable moments. So the first one, and this is an absolute certainty for most banks, at some point you're going to get this. If you're not reading the financial news, by reading the financial news, I don't mean reading the Financial Times every day. I just mean, subscribing to a daily, even a weekly newsletter from Bloomberg, CNBC, something that you quite like, whatever it might be, just to kind of keep on top of the markets and generally what's going on. I mean, look, you're not working on Wall Street right now, but you need to think that's the mindset that you're working towards. So you're looking to kind of push yourself. If somebody said to you, oh, what's a company that you'd like to invest in? You're like, I don't know, Apple. I mean, that's probably an answer that I could say. And I don't particularly have an interest in trading stocks. It's not my thing. But I could give you that answer because I know about Apple and people use Apple products, so we should trade that stock. But it's not really a useful answer, is it? So again, choose a recent piece of financial news, try to explain that in under 2 minutes, maybe give your opinions or your thoughts about that or something else that you'd like to learn. And also just think about something which interests you personally. People will struggle with saying, oh, well, what news should I pick? Again, just like we were talking with the why Morgan Stanley and picking out the facts, try to pick something that resonates with you personally, that you're interested in. Maybe you're really into robotics or artificial intelligence or tuna fish. I don't know, but pick something that really works for you, because again, when you're interested, that passion is going to come through when you're talking either, to the camera on a higher view or a Spark Hire interview, or over the phone when you're talking to the interviewer. What are some other questions? What's a stock you would like to go long or short on? This came up in an investment banking analyst interview. That just kind of seems like a no-brainer that you'd know stuff like that. What did the FTSE 100 close at yesterday? So today I'm filming, it is Wednesday, the 2nd of June. On the 1st of June, it closed at 7080.46. I don't know what that means. Also, which is funny, I've seen this question elsewhere as well for other companies. Who is the CEO of Morgan Stanley? It's James Gorman. So if you're kind of thinking, well, what questions am I going to get asked because I want to apply for this role and blah, blah, blah. Just think about questions that you would reasonably be able to answer. I mean, what they're really trying to screen out are people that don't genuinely have an interest in the role. And that's quite easy to do if you just pick out some little facts. So it could be, what's the DAX doing? What's the CAC 30 doing? And so on and so forth. It's so easy to do, and just pick apart the people who just aren't interested. It's like someone said, so you go on a date and you watch a film. I don't know about you guys. If I watch a film, generally I fall asleep. So, and your date at the time just says, oh, did you like the film? And I'm like, yeah, loved it. Great film. Because she picked the film. And then she might turn around and say, oh, did you fall asleep? I go, no. I was with you. I was with you all the way. It was great. There's some guy, he's a hunk, and some babe. Cool. And then she might say, oh, what did you like about the film? What specific part of the film did you like? And then basically I'm screwed. Because I've got no idea. Because basically 5 minutes in, and there's kind of the backstory and the struggle and the challenges and the guy and the girl, and I'm asleep. So yeah, it's that kind of specific questioning that can really help to separate the candidates who are just fair weather and just there because essentially they just think banking's a really easy way to make money, and those who actually have a genuine interest. There's nothing wrong with making money, but you need to play the game and jump through the hoops. Cool, so as promised, what I want to do with you now is go through the 10 biggest interview mistakes as published by Morgan Stanley themselves. And what they basically said is, we asked some of our senior interviewers from different business units to offer some insights. Here are the top 10 mistakes that they see. So I just want to go through these with you, because actually I thought a lot of times when I see these articles, they're just cookie cutter articles. They're not particularly useful, but I thought these were spot on. And these were obviously from interviewers because they really resonated with me. And there were a couple that maybe I had some differing opinions on, and that's more cultural than anything else. So number one, not doing the research. It's the single biggest and most common mistake made. Going into a job interview without having researched what the job involves or what the division does. If you're going for an investment banking position, know what deals the firm has done recently and be prepared to speak about their highlights. Great point. I couldn't agree more. So in this particular example, the interviewers just picked out IB and talking about deals or going to work in M&A, but it could be the same for risk, for finance, for operations, for exotics, whatever it may be. Just make sure you're on point and you've actually done the research, because there are going to be candidates out there who have, right? And it's going to be really obvious, the people who are really interested because they've been doing it since they were 15 and they're kind of in love with it a little bit, and you who just think investment banking is a good way to make money. Generally, you don't have to do a lot of research, but I'd say 30 minutes of research is going to put you on par with some really good candidates. Number two, not wanting the job. Don't tell us you're applying for a particular job just so you can get a foot in the door for a different role. It's okay to have a long-term career goal of working with external clients, for example, but you need to explain why you're interested in starting out in a non-client facing position you might be interviewing for, how it fits your skill set and helps your long-term career objective. Yeah, this is a weird one. I generally tend to come across this with, for me personally, candidates who I think are just quite arrogant. And they'll say, no, I only want to work in IBD, I only want to work in M&A. And I think that's fine. But there are some super smart people who also want to do that role. And by all intents and purposes, it looks like currently you're not quite there yet. So if you're looking for another way, and I have had clients previously who've done this and moved around in banks. I don't claim to be a banking specialist. Let me be most clear about that. But what I do know is that if you're going to work in a job, don't say you want to do that just so you can go somewhere else, particularly if you're being interviewed by somebody who works in that department. To be honest, it's just downright disrespectful. It's like going round to somebody's house for dinner, being served up a home-cooked meal and then saying, oh yeah, is this it? What's for dessert? I mean, I'm going to chuck you out of my house. Number 3, padding the resume. Don't put things on your CV that you can't live up to. Everything on there is fair game, so you need to be able to elaborate on every line. If you say you are fluent in a certain language, then we'll expect you can prove it. So 3 things come up to mind for this. People putting too many spoken languages, and for me, the basic level is business proficiency, which is, could you just go out and try to buy something in a shop with your language, or try and speak to somebody on the phone who you didn't know. If you can't do it, don't try it. I've had candidates do it and they've just been caught out in interview. The second thing generally relates to coding. Same thing, but with coding languages, right? If you can't build projects, if you can't solve problems, don't put it on there. And the third thing are people putting stuff which is like 10 years old or 7 years old because they kind of think it relates to banking or something like that. Generally, I like things that are fresh within the last 3 years. Because so you're young, really don't worry about it, but don't sort of try and pad out your CV for a lot of stuff that actually isn't that relevant because you did that when you were 16. Number 4, not sending a thank you email. You should always send a thank you note after an interview, but don't literally just say thank you. The note should be short and to the point, but not that short. Use the follow-up email as an opportunity to solidify your pitch. Say that you learned a lot and you're excited about the position. It shows you have sincere interest in the job. Now for me, I know based upon the language that's used in this post that this was written by somebody from the States and for people in the United States. Personally, I've never asked a candidate to send a thank you email ever in 8 years. I don't think it's something that people really expect in the UK. Do I think it might be a good thing? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've had people send me thank you emails and I think, oh, that's quite nice. If someone sent me a thank you email and then they're like, oh, when can I hear back? Oh, actually, I'm a really good candidate, blah, blah, blah. I just think, well, that's weird and a little bit pushy. But then Brits are different. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, for me personally, it doesn't really make very much of a difference. But I think a genuine gesture of interest or admiration is going to be touching, only if it's genuine. Number 5, not asking any questions. There is no excuse not to have any question to ask the interviewer. We will always ask whether you have any questions. Even if we've answered everything you want to know, improvise and work off something that was mentioned in the interview and say that you'd like us to elaborate more on a particular aspect of the position. I couldn't agree more. For me, somebody who asks a lot of questions is a sign of a bright and curious mind. Somebody who asks no questions or basically says, yeah, that sounds fine, just seems a little bit disinterested, or maybe they're a bit anxious or nervous and they don't want to trip themselves up. There's always stuff that you can ask. For example, you could just say, how did you end up at Morgan Stanley? What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Just something where you're asking that person for their experience or opinion is generally a question that people are interested in asking. My favorite cold question for a long time, just when I'd sit with random people, was, what's the best piece of advice anyone's ever given you? Because it was a real head scratcher for many people. Number 6, pigeonholing yourself. Sometimes someone will try to over-impress by showing their knowledge in a particular industry. If it's a general position you're going for, it could end up making you look like you aren't interested in anything else. I guess I kind of shorten this just to say, don't be too smart. At the end of the day, we have a saying here, which is don't teach your grandma how to suck eggs. Probably the person who you're speaking to may or may not, but probably is more knowledgeable on the subject than you and generally on the industry itself. So, stick to the question, be clear, be concise, And something which a lot of people underestimate is just be simple and be direct. Number 7, being too casual. A lot of students build a rapport with our recruiters and interviewers, and then in the interview, overstep the mark, do something that's just too casual. Be very polished. This includes dress code. You're not meeting with a friend. We're assessing how you'd hold yourself in front of clients and other employees. Personally, I don't tend to come across that too much. I think students pretty much have that sussed here over in the UK. But what I would say is that you really want to think, how would I come across to a client or pitching for a piece of business? I think that's really important. Of course, I say that while I'm in a scruffy t-shirt, but I think just thinking about how can I give the very good, best first impression is a really good attitude to have when dealing with people in situations that you're unsure about. Number 8, fumbling the obvious questions. There are questions that are standard, like tell me about yourself, why our firm, why this position. Have an answer in your head for these. It doesn't look good if you can't tell us about yourself. You really need to have an answer that explains why you differentiate our firm from the other banks and therefore why you've chosen to interview with us. Yeah, an interesting one that. I mean, we did deal with the 4 whys. A question I don't tend to see a lot is like why X instead of Y, like why Morgan Stanley instead of JP Morgan, or so on and so forth. I tend to find this seems to come down, particularly in front office roles, with very good candidates. So basically the interviewers have already identified that there's somebody who they want to target, and they kind of assume that they're interviewing for other banks. So they're saying, well, why us and not somebody else? Because also they're thinking about the time and the money that they're going to have to put into you. And they're thinking, well, do I really want to hire you if I think you're just going to jump ship in 6 months to a year? Number 9, pretending to know something when you don't. You end up digging a hole for yourself. You're better off just asking the interviewer to elaborate, or even say you don't know the answer but would like the opportunity to get back to them. Coming back in the thank you letter of an answer is completely acceptable. Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and I think it's something that students really struggle with, because naturally you've been taught to know stuff, to have answers, to be able to explain your way out of situations. And frequently what I come across in the UK, we have a term for this, we call it blagging, which is people who say a lot but don't say very much. The more seasoned the interviewer, the more they're just going to kind of want to cut through the crap. And if you don't have an answer, personally, I'm going to think much more highly of you if you just say, I don't know, actually, can I get back to you about that? I mean, whether you'd send it in an answer afterwards, but I'm not really sure. But, you know, I think you just trying to blag it or saying that you're not sure, going off on a tangent, to me, it's just kind of tiring, because I think you're just wasting time. Just saying that you don't know. Because also it doesn't speak highly in a very busy and frenetic environment. If I ask you to do something and you're somebody who just likes to blag, and then you say, yeah, I know how to do it, and then you make a mistake, you're not somebody I want on my team. However busy I am, I'd really like it if you said, look, I don't know, or can you repeat that? Because it's probably going to, even though I may not act like that at the time, it's definitely going to be better if you do it right first time, then you do it wrong and probably try and cover it up. And then I find out, you know, and then everybody loses. Last one, not being yourself. It's important that you come across as authentic. Answer questions in your own words rather than regurgitating a textbook response. It's a nuanced point because you don't want to be overly friendly, just be your professional self. It's okay to make small talk to break the ice and build a rapport with the interviewer. Just don't go overboard and be too casual. Yeah, I always find this really difficult, because when someone says like, just be yourself, it's like, but I can't be myself because it's an interview. I think coming across authentic and as somebody who seems polished is all to do with practice. It's just to do with going over, repeating those questions, practicing those questions, and just trying them over and over again. And the more that you practice, the better you get. Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Check out, there's a ton of free stuff in the description down below. There's also our new Skillshare course, the Pass the Interview Masterclass. Check that out, it's proving to be really popular. And like this video, comment, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what's the next video you want, and we will see you next time. Bye.